So this is what we're in for today. Jen Willie is an amazing subject matter expert. She and I built this program, God, about 8 years ago now, to help raise the level of people and diversity in our industry. Because I'm going to be quite frank, the out-of-home world is, been historically fraught with middle-aged white guys, and sometimes from Middle America or in England from the Midlands. And we are proud because diversity of people brings diversity of ideas and growth. And this has been a great program that Jen and Ajay and Blake and we've all built to really raise people personally and professionally. And today's topic will also be great. Then we have Jill Kelly, who's just an amazing person. I'll do an intro in a moment. Kate from AdQuick, a great programmatic partner of DPAA. And then, of course, Mary Ventresca, who is at Pattison, coming to us from Toronto, another great DPAA member. DPAA, as you all know, we do lots of stuff. We recently came back from Miami and Possible, where we get not only our members discounts, but we have an amazing series of meetings. We had meetings with brands from Lenovo, from Shopify, and so many others down there. And it's a great, in fact, there's a picture of Linda Yaccarino and Elon Musk when they first did this session at Possible some years ago, and they just had a breakup, as any of you in media or business know, last week. And there's our DPAA meeting at Possible on the right. There's Nicolette Leonardis in the front row with Debbie Benediba. And we've also got Francois there and so many others. And there's Claudia Damas, who's also on the board of We Do. This was a session we had with our friends and members from AdSquare as well. Kate is amazing from Lenovo, and we've had some good chats from her. She runs all the global media. And of course, our friend Jessica, who's on our brand council. And then some nice pictures from our friends from Assembly, upper right. And it's a great crew, our VIP dinner. And yeah, I think we actually got Nick Costin in a picture back there. We were once again joined by the wonderful and amazing Jill Kelly at our private sessions at Cannes Lions, where we've created what we call the magic middle. You can go to a conference and see important people on stage, or you can pay a consultant a lot of money to have someone in a room that may or may not want to be there. We have these interactive dialogues, intimate discussions where everybody's involved and everybody gets to know each other. And we did that, of course, with Jill Kelly, but also our friends from Verizon and MasterCard and Android and United Airlines and Arla Foods. And it was a great place where everybody really got to know everybody and learn business opportunities, business challenges. Some pictures from Cannes Lions. We had our dinners and our cocktail parties. My favorite moment was there I am with a man named JB Smoove, who is the lead actor on Curb Your Enthusiasm with Larry David, and he and I opened up our event where I did my own imitation of JB Smoove. And there's some other pictures from our Cannes Lions. We program 3.5 serious days of back-to-back meetings and events. And then everybody, please join us at the IPG and Rapport offices. They've got beautiful offices. We've done this recently as well, about 8 months ago, and they host us there at the Old Bailey in London. And we also will once again have some great brand leaders and ad speakers there as well. That's our next town hall meeting in London. Join us and reach out to Tim. You see Tim's address here or any of us, and we'll get you information. This is our members town hall in London coming up, which have been very successful. We usually get about 150 people to that. And then our next town hall in New York City on September 18th, sponsored by Dactonics. And that the actual place will be announced, but we've got some wonderful venues we're talking to. So please reach out as well. And if you folks want to grab your phones and take a look at this QR code for a moment, you could hover your camera over it. What you'll get is a calendar placement and invitation for our DPAA Summit, October 14th of this year. This is the largest one-day media and marketing event every year. We get over or under 1,000 people each year, big name brands, and we always have someone from Broadway live performance and newsmakers and other very wonderful and important people. So join us. I'll give the cameras another moment to hover over and join us October 14th at the big summit. We do sell out every year. As you can see, the room is always packed, and join us, please. And then at the event, we will be celebrating our Women's Empowerment Program, as Blake is doing right now, where we will have leading women in the digital media world. We'll be honoring them. Get your votes in, and then that will be also terrific. I am going to just do a quick kind of intro because I'm just so excited of having Jill Kelly here. She's the CEO of North America for Assembly and great experience at Essence Mediacom, CEO before that, and a great many years running marketing at Group M and Publicis and Starcom, a true real media executive and lovely person and really smart as well, in addition to holding some great executive titles. Ajay and I got to know her during COVID. We got to know, the ceilings of her apartment and the videos and all that. And just wonderful to have you here. Assembly is a terrific company, hot streak driven by Mark Penn, who is probably the hottest holdco at the moment. And they do great advertising and they do great sport beach. And they also do something which is important to me as well. They've led an important initiative to get advertising back into news. And it's so critical that advertisers support news, television, radio, local newspapers, et cetera, because in order for great democracies to function, we need great news operations. And that is waning because advertisers have been, not spending what they have. So if I can encourage everybody to call and to support what Mark Penn and Stadwell and everybody are doing, is support news. It's critical for democracy. And then, of course, Kate Burwell, our friend from AdQuick, coming to us from Manhattan, New York, New York. Barry Ventresca from Patterson, our member in Canada, and then the amazing Jen Willie, who is our subject matter expert, and has built this terrific program. We have live meetings in person. We have these webinars, and it really raises the level of everybody personally and professionally. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jen Willie, who's my partner in building this over the years. And go ahead, Jen.
Or you might
Wonderful.
have to unshare your screen first. There you go.
There we go. Well, thank you, Barry, for all that you do and the team does to lift the entire industry, but then also with the work that we've done with WeDo and this leadership series over the course of the past now almost 8 years since we started it. This is a tough time right now. And so the reason why we're focusing on this conversation is at Wet Cement, we just conducted a survey of 400 global leaders, manager levels and above, to ask them what is the most difficult thing for them right now? Where do they need help? And hands down, number one was leading difficult discussions. There was no close number two. And so through this difficult time, I'm so excited that we'll be able to give you a recipe for success so that you can confidently lead these discussions, whatever difficult discussion means to you. And so I want you to start giving that some thought, because we're going to ask you, what does it mean to you to have a difficult discussion? Whether it is that you are an executive, a manager, or even an individual contributor. But first, I'm so excited that we will get to hear from the brilliant and wonderful Jill Kelly in terms of her journey, from starting as a planner and buyer on the agency side to now being the North American CEO for Assembly Global. So with that, Jill, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Barry. It's really great to be here. And Jen, to your point, I think, I am not surprised at all that leading, having, and I'll also say being a recipient of difficult conversation is very topical, and it's probably one of the more challenging things that leaders, no matter what title you have, no matter what role you may have, they are inevitable and perhaps at a higher frequency in the modern context, given what we're seeing in the marketplace than it has been in the past. I'll just share a couple of thoughts, and they're really rooted in absolute failure on my part in delivering a difficult conversation. And also, the second is being a recipient of a failed, difficult conversation. And I share I share these failures because there's much to be learned from them. And I think it's really important for us to recognize that there is no such thing as a pristinely delivered difficult conversation. I don't even know what that means, but there really isn't a perfect format. But I'll just share some of the observations that I had, both being a giver of difficult conversation and being a recipient of difficult conversations. There's this saying, I think it's Mark Twain, the worst things that have ever happened to me never happened. And I'll give you an example. I was due to have a very difficult conversation with a client, and there was just some symptoms of the relationship that this particular client was a major contributor to. For about a week, it weighed on me very heavily about what this conversation was going to look like, and candidly, what the outcome of that conversation was going to look like. And number one, I rushed through the conversation. So what happens is that when you rush through the conversation without giving an opportunity for reaction and giving space for dialogue, the difficulty or the meaningfulness is at the same speed. It just gets lost. As a result of my speedy conversation, because I just wanted to candidly get through it, the outcome that I had wanted in terms of a constructive path forward actually resulted in departure of the relationship. And I hold that experience very close to my heart because that was not the outcome I desired. It actually impacted my business at the time. And it gave me a moment of very serious reflection about how I should be thinking about my word choices and what is the outcome that I wanted. And every single moment of that 15-minute discussion, 22-minute discussion has to be geared towards that outcome. And because I rushed through it, because I just wanted to get through it, it just did not land in the constructive, co-collaborative, in the best interest of us. So that was a very significant economically impact learning that I had. And that's never been repeated again. I talked about, my mom has always said to me, Jill, don't go through it. Don't get through it, go through it. And that is something that has stuck with me for a good majority of my career when it comes to having difficult conversation. This particular example is when I was a recipient of a difficult conversation. So the setting was I had that my HR lead, my role was being eliminated. This was quite some time ago. My role was being eliminated. And the person came into, I was called into an office. The person came in and said, I'm just a messenger, and I need you to know that there's been a change. Been a change in direction. Your role has been eliminated. And if you have any further questions, please email ... at company.com. And literally it was maybe 90 seconds. You can imagine how unproductive and how that made me feel in the context of this is my career. This is my job. I am the major income earner for my family. And to have this particular conversation in 90 seconds delivered by a self-declared messenger. And if you have any follow-up questions, email this generic, whatever, this generic email address. Has really kind of impacted me in terms of what is my duty of care when I have to have those conversations. And we've all been recipients of it. I'm sure we've all also been givers of it in terms of what is our duty of care when it comes to difficult conversations. And even if the outcome is a departure from the said organization, it is really important that that final mile is treated with absolute respect. And transference of accountability, i.e., I'm simply the messenger, the speed and thoughtlessness upon which I had received that conversation taught me how to be better. So the things that I've taken from that particular conversation is take the time. Have the conversation. Don't rush through it to get through it, but go through it. People will very rarely remember the start of a book, but they will always remember how that book ended. Be a good author. Set that person up for success. And of course, be on time. I'll just close with, I do believe that, a certain amount of pain plus an equal dose of retrospection does equal progress. That's taken from Ray Dalio's Principles, the Principles book. And one doesn't get better if we don't learn from pain. And each of us can describe a moment of pain that we can all learn from. So pain plus reflection, retrospection equals progress, whether it's as a leader, as candidly just a human being, as a mom or a dad, as a manager, as a daughter to aging parents. And I know that it's worrisome to even think about pain. And I know difficult conversations can cause quite a lot of anxiety and angst. So don't squash the fear, but don't be afraid to go through it, not just get through it.
Wow, this is Jen's show, but I just want to weigh in because I'm such a big fan of Jill, and I just wanted for everybody here to repeat, don't rush through it. Don't get through it, go through it. Thanks to your mother as well, Jill. And we grow via pain, and I love what you termed the duty of care. We have to take on that duty before these conversations, and that will enable everybody to have a better outcome. And thank you so much. Such great, wise words. And the last thing I'll say is my favorite quote in the world is Mark Twain's quote. Thank you, Jill. As a neurotic hypochondriac, I have also been through some terrible things in my life, and some of them almost happened. So
But not all of them. Not all of
exactly.
them.
And some of them almost happened. They didn't, none of them happened, but they've been, so it's a great quote. Thank you so much, Jill. I turn it over to Jen. Thank you for joining us, everybody.
Yes, Jill, and I absolutely love the be a great author because we all remember the end of the story. And so we all have a different story and we're all at different places in our journey. So when you think about where you are today as a CEO, and then looking back to where you were starting in your career, because obviously we have a wide variety of people who are here with us today. Are there any tricks of the trade that you've used, aside from the great advice that you've shared, in terms of how you frame up the conversation?
So I'll just use a very tactical, practical one. Number one, what are your first 30 seconds? Because those 30 seconds will shape the tone and set the tone for the meeting. So what I have learned is that you use your 30 seconds very wisely. For example, Jen, This is going to be a difficult conversation, and I recognize fully it's both a hard conversation for me to give, and it's going to be an equally hard conversation for you to hear. But I want you to know that this conversation is because I'm here for it and I'm here with you. But know that the intention is it's going to be difficult. So just setting up the tone of mutual empathy, locking eyes, being on time, being very intentional about your word choice, and preparation has been really important. How do you use it? Like, what is the first sentence out of your mouth?
I couldn't agree more. And that's why I'm so glad we'll give everyone a bit of a playbook. And your advice, which you have not seen the playbook yet, is very much embedded in terms of where we'll be starting. And to the last point that you made there about preparation being so important, in the fast-paced world that we're in right now, where there is seismic change every single day, any advice of how to be prepared in the moment? And when you don't really have days or weeks to think through what that conversation should look like.
Yeah. So there are two things, the two tactics that I have used is, Jill, at the end of this conversation, how do you want that person to feel? And at the end of this conversation, what is the non-negotiable outcome? How do you want that person to feel? And what is the non-negotiable outcome? So in the context of, if a difficult conversation is an exit, that's a difficult conversation. A non-negotiable outcome is there is no negotiation of the exit in terms of that is the outcome. Don't apologize. Don't apologize for it. Don't give hope, false hope. That is there an opportunity to? And also, like, write it down, like, type it out. I want Jen to feel this: respected. I want her to feel valued, but I also want her to feel that this is a business decision and that this outcome is not open to negotiation. Because the hardest thing that happens is if a manager says, I'm really sorry, it wasn't my doing. And then the person says, well, can I talk to somebody else? Is there an opportunity to? And then you start to elongate the pain. So non-negotiable outcome, the two words you want that person to feel.
That is fantastic advice. And before we dive into the workshop part of this, I do have one more question for you, which much of what we've been talking about is when you were in a leadership role and need to lead the difficult conversation, or you're receiving it from someone else. But for anybody who might be joining us here, who's not necessarily a manager, who may be an individual contributor or a planner, a buyer, a strategist, whatever it might be, any advice for them in terms of how they can design and prepare for a difficult conversation with either their manager or senior leaders within the organization so that they can maintain a good relationship and it won't reflect badly on them?
Yes. I think to my earlier point about what is the first sentence that is going to set the tone and the context. So I'll just make this. So if the conversation is about, in this particular meeting last Thursday, Jen, you said something that really made me feel small, belittled, and I want to take an opportunity to have a conversation with you regarding not so much about how I felt, but how that transmitted to the entire team as the ultimate leader of my organization. So how do you frame it in the business context and put the reflection not exclusively on you, but also feedback for the manager, because none of us are perfect, God knows. I mean, I have I have a great relationship with my mistakes. How does that reflect on the individual as well as citizens of this company?
I absolutely love that. Being able to paint the bigger picture of what this means for the team, for the business, potentially on your role for the industry, can really help frame up what that conversation is in the right way. So Jill, thank you so much for your time and your brilliance and your vulnerability for sharing those difficult situations, because sometimes we get in our head that we're the only ones who have a misstep, but
Yeah,
perfection is a myth. And the more we have
sure.
strong, courageous leaders like you who can share that through your own stories and lessons learned, the easier it is for the rest of us. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And as always, for any of you who have joined our workshops before, this will be highly interactive. And so we want you to play along. We want to hear who you are, how you're feeling, but also do it in a way that is entirely anonymous so that you can be your most genuine and authentic self. And that's why we use this tool called Menti. And you can either click on the link that Barry had put there into the chat for all of you, or you could also just grab your phone, hover over the QR code that you see on the screen right now. Or if you prefer, you can also just open up a browser, type in menti.com. That's menti.com that you see on the screen there. And then you will put in the code that you see on the screen. But in case you opened another window up, I'm going to say that code out loud for you. That code is 74985690. Once again, 74985690. And we would love to hear from all of you. So please join us as we are going through this. And we want to get a bit of a sense from all of you of what are the most difficult discussions for you to lead. Now, we're going to ask this twice. This is for everyone, regardless of whether you have direct reports or you're an individual contributor. What are those most difficult discussions? And you will see those answers coming up in real time. And it looks like we have 109 of you here right now. And we have about 54 of you who have come on to Menti. So we want everyone to join, everyone to weigh in. And this will give us that most accurate reflection of how everybody feels about these challenging topics. So I'll give you one more minute to read through and weigh in.
And Jen, maybe we go to the QR code when you get a chance to get more people to sign up for the Menti. It's so easy.
Sure. Sure. And
Yeah.
and if we can put that link right in the chat one more time, in case it looks like we've had a few new folks who have joined us. Blake, I know that you've helped me with that, so that would be terrific. And then you can also, even if you're not using the QR code on your phone or on a separate window, you can just type in menti.com. And then that way we will continue to get everybody weighing in and really understand so that we can make this as tailored and relevant for all of you as possible. Even with a good portion, about half of you weighing in so far, it's pretty clear that asking for a raise or a promotion, as well as addressing conflict, are two of the largest areas that challenge us when it comes to having these types of conversations. But we're also seeing that addressing those unrealistic timelines and expectations, and certainly giving critical feedback, are really challenging for us. And I was just talking about this whole topic and why this is such an issue for most of us. But actually, I'm curious, give me a little hand raise, or even you could take yourself off of mute and give me a woot woot, or you can use the emoticons. Who here has ever gone through a class, either in high school or college, around leading difficult discussions or courageous conversations? I'm seeing a lot of head nods, right? It's probably one of the most critical skills that we have in business. And it is a topic that I'm actually in Orlando, Florida right now at a conference with 3,000 people, and I've spoken to hundreds. Not one person has ever had any kind of formalized training around it. So you're not alone. We don't know how to address conflict the right way, but that's what we're going to focus on today. I am curious though, for those of you who are managers though, what is toughest for you as it relates to those tough conversations with your direct reports? I'll give you a minute to weigh in. If you are not a people leader and you don't have any direct reports, please don't answer right now. This should also give us a good sense of about how many managers or more senior folks, directors, executives that we have who are joining us today. Okay, with a fair number, about a quarter of you who have already weighed in, again, we're seeing that providing feedback around performance concerns is hands down the most challenging thing here. And this is part of why it's so critical that we become confident in these skills, because research shows that if you are not getting that feedback, the likelihood that you are going to leave your current employer is exponentially higher. People who do not get feedback from their managers, 63% of them say that they would leave working for that company. 63%. And there's a vast amount of research, and we'll cover some of this as well, showing that women are also less likely to get feedback than their male colleagues. And in many cases, that's because managers, regardless of their gender, are concerned about how it might be received. And so we're also going to talk about some strategies of how you can handle that so that we can make sure that everybody is getting that gift of feedback so that they can improve and learn and get stronger, just as Jill had said in the starting point. So we are going to walk through a number of different steps. I like to think of this as our recipe for leading a difficult discussion with confidence. Now, one thing that you will see in the chat, you will have the ability to click on the really detailed and actionable resource guide that we've created for you that will give you specific examples of how you can put each and every one of these steps into practice, along with some sample phrases that you can use. And it will make it really easy for you to be able to take what we're going to be covering today and make sure that this is something that you can do with confidence. So let's start off with step one, which is choreographing the conversation. And I will say throughout the time that we have together, we're going to thread in some of those ways that we can leverage generative AI. I'm so addicted to it. I think of myself somewhat as Gen AI right now. But when it comes to choreographing the conversation, I'm not talking this type of choreography. I'm talking about when are you having the conversation? Where are you having the conversation? So I want you to give it a second of thought. If you have a difficult conversation that you need to have, and ideally for the remainder of the session, think about what is a tough discussion you need to have. You know you need to have it. Perhaps you've been putting it off, and it doesn't just have to be at work. It could be in your personal life. It could be with your partner, your spouse, your family, your roommate, whoever that might be. Okay. So think about when would you do it? And would you even plan out what day of the week that it might be? So let's think if it was a work situation, what do you think is the best day of the week for a challenging conversation? I'll give you a minute to weigh in. Okay, we now have about half of you who have weighed in, and keep those answers coming in. But as you can see here, it looks like the vast majority of you are saying Wednesday and Friday. We've got some thrown in there for Tuesday as well, a little bit of Thursday. The answer is Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are the ideal dates, according to extensive research, to have a difficult conversation with someone in the workplace. And there's a lot of reasons behind that. But one of the things that's most important in terms of why you want to keep it to Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday is that the vast majority of people, when they come back to work on a Monday, they might be flustered. They might be thinking about, how am I going to catch up over the weekend? And so they're going to be more emotionally charged in the conversation on a Monday than they would on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, because they don't feel as settled in. Friday is the least valuable day to have one of these conversations. And part of why I'm so glad we're sharing this, because many people think, and I used to think this too before I did the research, well, if we have the conversation on a Friday, that will give them some time to think it over the weekend and decompress and process the information. But in fact, yes, they will process the information. They certainly will think about it. But research shows people are much more likely to get themselves incredibly anxious, get themselves upset, start scenario planning, different ways that this will continue as they get to Monday. And then most importantly, as Jill had even said, it's so critical that you're there and able to have a dialogue with someone. And so if you're having that conversation on a Friday and they have questions that surface, now they can't ask those for several days. And so what happens is the fear and the anxiety will snowball. So now we know. Schedule those conversations Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But now I want you to also think about what time of day you want to have those challenging conversations. So should you start off strong in early morning? Should you wait for late morning? Do it over lunch, take them out somewhere nice. Do it in the afternoon at some point or at the end of the day. So in case they get upset, then they can just leave after the conversation. What do we think? Okay, and in the interest of time, I'm going to say it looks like we've got a smart group here, because research shows, again, you don't want to do it too early in the morning, especially because people might not have had their coffee yet, which they may need for a conversation like this. And that in fact, late morning is the best time to have it. Okay. And if you cannot have that conversation in the late morning, you'll want to focus on the early part of the afternoon, 1:30 to 3. And then on the piece of where you want to do it, it is so critical, especially in today's world where we have limited private offices and we also have so many teams who are distributed. You want to make sure that if you are physically with someone in an office space, that you have a place where you can have a confidential conversation. So if in your offices you have the nice big break room where everybody's having coffee or lunch that's catered in, that is not the place to have that meeting. You need to find a quiet spot away from everybody else. Also, if you don't have that quiet spot in your office space, get out of the office. Go and have a conversation in a coffee shop. And then if you need to give this feedback to somebody who is remote, send them a calendar invite rather than just getting them off guard. Because just as Barry had said as we were starting, you know, there were some people walking along on the street. They might not be fully present and ready for this challenging conversation. So by keeping it general with just like a check-in or a chat, or my favorite is even to do, like if I wanted to have this conversation with Jill right now, I would do Jennifer plus Jill and just put that on there so they can't start hypothesizing too much on what it's going to be, but they know that this is going to be a conversation where they need to be in one place. Now, according to proprietary research that we did at Wet Cement to understand why women are less likely to get feedback, it's because managers are more concerned that they will get emotional and cry. Now, as we can see here, not everybody gets emotional as a woman, but it is a perception that, well, I don't want to give critical feedback or bad news because what if she gets upset and what if she cries? So here's some simple advice, because you need to give everybody, regardless of their gender, critical feedback. You need to deliver bad news at times to everybody on your team. So here's the easiest thing, especially if you're going to be in person with someone. Have some tissues on hand. Go to the supply closet, go to CVS or Walgreens, buy a packet of tissues and have it sitting physically on the desk, ideally somewhere where it's reachable. And if they don't reach for it, you quietly hand them a tissue. That is the first step. And then all you have to do is wait quietly and give them some space. Okay. For most people, when they do get upset and emotional, those feelings of being at the arc of the top of the anger or sadness last for a maximum of 30 seconds. And from there, it's much easier. So don't think about what you're seeing in those first few seconds as, oh gosh, it's going to stay like this or get progressively worse. In most cases, if you give somebody a chance to just collect themselves, then they will recover pretty quickly. But be thoughtful and sensitive. And if they take a minute or so, don't start looking at your watch and making them feel bad about it. But if it does get to the point where someone cannot recollect their thoughts and regroup and calm back down, then the other alternative is to say, you know what, it seems like you are upset by this right now. Why don't you take some time and let's regroup in a half hour? Or if you had that meeting in the late morning with the ideal time frame, you could say, let's regroup in the early afternoon if someone is really upset. If they're beside themselves, then you could even say, why don't you take the rest of the day and then let's talk either from home tomorrow or if you'll be back in the office tomorrow. Okay, so do we feel like we have a good sense of how we want to choreograph it, days of the week, time of day, and then what do we do if we get that bad reaction that we're all scared about? So give me a thumbs up if you feel like we got that now. Okay, so now let's start going to the meat of how you do this. And Jill made this very easy for me because she had said it's so important about how you start with that tone of your opening. And the best way to do that, as she had given us that beautiful example, is to be empathetic and to state your intention of why are you having this conversation. Taking that time, just like Jill had shared, to think about what those first 30 seconds are. And if we can mute whoever's talking, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much. And if it is a conversation that you're having that's not about...
Blake, can you mute everybody but Jennifer, Blake? Is there a way to do that?
It was you.
It was who?
It was you. I muted you.
Oh, wow. Really? Oh, God.
See? Perfection is a myth. We're all imperfect. Okay, so if the difficult conversation that you need to have is not about somebody leaving the organization, then you have shared goals. And by starting the conversation with what is working and what are your shared goals, that will also help to set the stage for making it a really productive dialogue where they'll be open to getting that feedback. And certainly, if you are sharing anything positive that is not trying to make it a praise sandwich, where it's inappropriate positivity that might not even have anything to do with the conversation, and then wrapped again with inappropriate or inauthentic positivity. But anything in a situation, especially as we just saw, the number one thing that all of you had shared that's difficult is giving that performance feedback. So if you can share, here's some things that are going well. I want to make sure that we're underscoring that. And here are the areas where we're going to need to see some change. And then one of the most important parts of doing this is being clear and direct with either what your concern is or any feedback that you provide. Far too often, people try and talk around the issue because they're so uncomfortable with it, and that leads to a lot of confusion. Many times, people don't even know whether it's good news or bad news if you are not just being clear and direct with that feedback or with your ask or with what your concern is. You also want to think, as Jill had said, about the words that you're choosing. So this is one of those areas where you can leverage generative AI. If you take 3 seconds and voice text what you plan on saying, you can then prompt generative AI to say, help me make this less emotional, more direct, and not as vague as it might have been. And even better yet, you can even role play with the voice activated versions that you have, whether you use Microsoft Copilot, ChatGPT, whatever your preferred Gen AI platform is of choice. And after you go through the role play and get out those awkward feelings, again, you can now ask generative AI to serve as your communications coach and give you feedback on how you could have approached the role play better. The other thing that you want to do is, as Jill had said, it's so critical that you are very specific and provide examples, but that it's not emotionally charged language and it's very neutral so that you don't get them fearing things that much more. And as I had mentioned earlier, this is part of why it's so critical. Women receive 22% more feedback about their personality than men do. And then they also receive 30% more what's called exaggerated feedback than men. And this came from an exhaustive research study that was done by Textio last year by looking at thousands of performance reviews for an equal representation of gender. But if you are giving feedback or needing to have that difficult conversation with somebody of color, it's even more important that you think about how can you be as clear and specific as possible, because our Black sisters who I can't see everybody when I'm presenting, but who we may have on here now, or colleagues of ours, they get 9 times as much feedback that is not actionable compared to white men under 40. Okay, so this is not saying somebody's better than another, but it's just the reality of how we have to get comfortable with everyone to give the same clear, direct, neutral, actionable feedback to everyone that's out there. And the easiest way to do this is to share some evidence or proof points or data or insights that will make it entirely clear for them, so they're not confused as they walk away. And just as Jill had said, you want to make sure you're sharing that broader impact on the organization. And to Jill's point about if it's a conversation with somebody who's more senior to you, what could be the ripple effects across the organization that could have some pretty negative ramifications for them, but framing it up in a way that is non-threatening at the same time. So sticking to the facts, showing that data and evidence will help make it that much easier to do so. And as Jill said, you have to invite dialogue into the conversation. You cannot just talk at or to someone. You can give them that moment. So let's say they didn't get upset or emotional. After you've shared the crux of what you've prepared, that first perhaps 30 seconds, take a pause, take a breath, and then ask them, what questions do you have so far? How can we come to a solution together around how we can improve this? What are your ideas about how we can start to change what's happening with the team or with the behavior. And in the resource guide that every one of you will be able to access, we have a number of different examples of ways that you can frame this up depending upon the type of conversation you're having, whether it's with your manager, whether it's with a direct report, whether it's with a client, just as Jill had shared, or a colleague, because these are very different situations that we need to understand the nuances around each one. And also really think about what is your relationship with that person, because that should also, again, really dictate how much time and preparation you put into your word choices. And the beauty of it is you can build muscle memory of how you want to respond based on what are likely responses from them. So you don't have to be fearing, well, what if they ask me X, Y, or Z? Well, what if they ask you that? Start thinking about what are the phrases or the ways that you can handle that so it doesn't just escalate from there. So here's some examples of some of those key phrases. And again, in the resource guide, we have so many more for you that are relevant for the digital media and digital out of home industry. But it's as simple as things like, you know what, let's look at the facts and we'll come up with a plan. Or I want to help you be successful here, if they are personalizing it in a negative way. Or if they think you're blaming them. No, it's not about blame. It's about moving forward together. Here's what I'm seeing. I'd like your take, or even, I believe in you. I believe in your ability to turn this around. And so if you practice these things and say it out loud, you'll start to see what feels really natural, genuine, and authentic for you. And then it's as simple as wrapping it up the same way you would wrap up any client, partner, colleague conversation, which is have total clarity on what are the next steps. And with that, make sure that timing is clear as well as accountability. Who's doing what? What are the homework assignments that you're giving to them, but as well as for yourself? Because that really shows your intent and that you're coming to this from a collaborative spirit. And then close it out with encouragement. Let them know that you're committed to their success, to their productivity, to their happiness. And then that will really help to tie up the conversation with a bow. And once you go through all of those steps, I promise it will make it so much easier for any conversation that you have in the future. And in that resource guide, you'll even see on the last page, we have a 10-step cheat sheet that you could keep and copy paste it. I don't care what you do with it, and use it for any time that you need to have a difficult conversation with anybody in your life. It's something you could share and keep in your notes so that you'll remember, I need to approach these 10 steps through the process. And then the other great thing that you can do, because we're in an environment where we have such wonderful people in the industry, is share your goal of getting better at this and more confident and more prepared with an accountability partner. That could be, it could be your manager, it could be a friend, it could be your peer mentor at work, because you are 65% more likely to meet the goal of doing that if you make the commitment to somebody else that you're going to take this extra step. And then you just got to practice and practice and practice and do it. And I promise it will get easier with every passing time that you do it. And as I mentioned earlier, don't forget to role play with Gen AI, because that will help you in the safest of spaces. But you could also role play with somebody who you trust and admire. So if you need to have a difficult conversation with your direct report, think about, is this a conversation?
Are you okay?
Oh, if we could mute Marcy, I think that would be great. Let's try and do that right now. But think about, who is that person, whether it is your manager, whether it is your peer mentor or a colleague, that you can also role play in real life, because the dynamic can be very different than when you're just trying to say it to generative AI or something along those lines. So with that, these are those steps. And just by following along, it can make a dramatic difference, because when you have a roadmap, you now know exactly what you need to get there. So who's going to be ready to cook up one of those difficult conversations? And what is the biggest difference that you will make in terms of how you approach that difficult discussion that you know that you need to have? Now, as I had mentioned, you'll be able to get the resource guide, as well as we really ask that you participate in a very brief survey. It should take you a maximum of 3 minutes. And I promise you also, at the end of that survey, you'll also be able to get the resource guide there as well. So that will help inform the topics that we will address for our future leadership series of workshops and panels and hearing from brilliant leaders like Jill Kelly. Okay, so this is where you can also download that resource guide if you weren't able to access the link that was in the chat. And now I'm so excited to be able to also get the perspective from our two panelists who we have joining us, of Katie and Mary, because we want to answer your questions and we want to hear from a variety of leaders of what are those lessons they've learned along the way. So one great thing about Menti is now what you can also do is put any questions that you would have for Katie, for Mary, for me, for Jill, for anybody else. If you want to crowdsource the question you have, you can put that into Menti right now, and it is 100% anonymous. So if you're not comfortable raising your hand for the Q&A, then this is a way to do it. And the other great part about that is you can vote up and give a thumbs up to the questions that you want to see answered the most, so that we can make sure that we spend time in the areas that are most relevant to all of you. So with that, I welcome Katie and Mary, who are going to be joining us for the panel. I'm also going to encourage all of you to think about, is there a question that you would really like to be asked so that we can help support you throughout your journey as well? So Mary and Katie, thank you so much. And if we can make sure that they are also not muted right now, that would be great. And Mary, I'd love to start with you, because with everybody, for the most part, who's on this call, being in the world of media and marketing and digital and ad tech, which is so fast paced, how do you handle having these challenging conversations when things are constantly changing on the fly? Forget about even what's happening in the greater world, but when it's conversations about campaign performance or creative differences, what strategies have you found that have been really effective for you?
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. That's a great question. I think having those conversations about campaign performance or creative, being in out of home, we probably have that more than other media, that we're always on that in that position to explain certain results when they don't necessarily go the way perhaps a client had expected. And what it's similar to what we've been talking about here is to prepare in that conversation and to remove from the conversation any blame. So I approach it as like a hospital ER triage. Okay, let's talk about the problem and let's put aside any blame. We're here to figure out what happened, focus on the facts, because people can get their backs up very quickly and start to deflect and blame. And when it comes to campaign performance, it makes sense. There's a lot of anxiety. Dollars have been spent. There's client feedback. So there are heightened emotions, and they can quickly take over that conversation. I have been in those meetings, and things can get very tense very quickly. So it's about getting everyone on board. I think it was Jill who said, make sure up front that you have agreement that we're here to talk about, and then the issue, and everybody needs to agree to that. And we ask everyone to agree not to blame anyone, because someone might want to jump in. Well, we want to deal with the problem at first, and then we'll learn, did it not perform because of things within our control or outside of our control? And if it was within our control, what can we do next time? When it comes to creative challenges, I have learned this the hard way, because I oversee quite a few creative people, and I came from media and a sales background where things, especially sales, are much more blunt. And creative people are very attached to what they create. And even though we could say it's just business, they still have an attachment to what they do. So again, you need to remove the personal from that and actually state it up front. I think Jill said that as well, that this isn't a conversation that we both don't enjoy having, but it needs to be had in the better interest or the bigger interest of the company or the campaign or the client. And don't take it personally, please, because we're just going to focus on the challenge here with the creative. So that's pretty much the same advice that we've heard, is prepare for it and make sure everyone's in agreement up front that we're going to focus on the issue, and we're not going to have any blaming or personal attacks happening.
And in your experience, Mary, have you seen that it's been a better outcome if you've addressed the issue head on quickly, or if you've waited a bit and thought about, let me delay the conversation until I really think about the right approach?
I think you need to have a little bit of time to think about it, but there's delaying, and then there's procrastinating, and then there's just avoiding. So where are you in that continuum? Because having a little bit of a wait to think about things is not bad, but don't put it off, and then definitely don't avoid it. Try to do everything you can not to have that conversation, because I have experienced it. The longer you let something fester or simmer, hoping it'll work itself out, especially if there's conflict between staff, that they'll work it out. But it just becomes worse. Like, it never actually resolves itself. And then it looks as if it's just nobody really cares about the situation. And then it just brings up more and more difficulty. So definitely wait till you're prepared and you're able to have that conversation, but don't procrastinate and don't avoid.
Well, and I love, Brene Brown was the one who had said that research shows that really awkward moment for you being the one when you need to be vulnerable or have that uncomfortable conversation, that feeling that we are all trying to procrastinate around only lasts about 7 seconds. And so just knowing that it's 7 seconds of discomfort rather than potentially days or weeks or months, if you don't ever address it, can really make a difference as soon as you're ready, like you had said.
That's great to know. 7 seconds is nothing, right?
7 seconds is nothing.
Yeah.
Almost as it's just like ripping off a Band-Aid, right? We let it bother us and fester for far too long. And so Katie, I'd love to get your perspective, because obviously in our industry, you've got all kinds of challenging conversations. So Mary just talked about, how different it may be when you're talking to somebody in creative versus a client. And then obviously for everyone who's in a sales role or account management role, where you're regularly having those conversations with clients, and sometimes it's not always good news that we need to share. I would love to see if you have any examples of perhaps some challenging client conversations that you've had, but that were able to lead to a positive result or outcome, or perhaps even just like Jill started, where you learned a hard lesson along the way that then you were able to implement in the future so that you could steer those conversations in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks to the DPAA team for bringing everyone together today. I think, a lot of what we've kind of touched on today hits it on the head. Coming to every meeting with that agenda and setting the table for what you're going to cover really sets you up for those difficult conversations. I know earlier in my career, and sometimes still today, you come into those conversations that are going to be difficult with that anxiety and with that fear. But that, the other people coming to that conversation may be coming with that same level of fear. There may be that mutual feeling that this might be a tough conversation today, and it doesn't have to be adversarial. So by coming in and setting the table that we're going to address this up front, and this is our agenda for the day, and we want to end the conversation here and set it up so that we're addressing these issues, we're going to get through it. And then we're going to come out the other side and have a plan, good, bad, neutral. ideally good. We're going to get through it together. And I think having the intention of a real radical agreement between yourself and your client is kind of always my intention. I see it, in when you're chatting with your friends, when you're chatting amongst colleagues, anytime there's that sort of division between what your client's thinking and what you're thinking, that friction just creates so many headaches. So if you're having those touch bases and you're having those, really frequent check-ins, and you're always aligned with your client, and things are getting misaligned, you and your client can stay on the same wavelength. But if you're not having those frequent check-ins, you're gonna keep kind of diverting, and it's gonna cause more headaches and more difficult conversations. So the more you can stay aligned, the more you can stay on that same wavelength, and be avoidant, be more on top of it. I think is kind of the best way to keep your peace of mind, keep your client's peace of mind, and keep that intention, and always keep those agendas on pace, because no one wants to have those really tough, difficult conversations that go left, because they happen, and they're no fun.
They absolutely happen, and you are correct. Nobody ever wants those. So let's talk a little bit about that. We talked about what you could do as the manager if you're having a conversation and the other person gets emotionally charged, cries, whatever it might be. Do either of you have any advice for everyone here if you're on the receiving end of the bad news and you're getting emotionally charged, of how you could help stay composed during that difficult discussion when you might feel emotional? Mary, and you want to take a stab at that?
Sure, and that's been a challenge for me still to this day, because I get my reaction tends to be more defensive or something like that, right? So it's I would just suggest that let the person finish. Do not interrupt. Let them have their say what they need to say, because it's, again, not uncomfortable. It's not comfortable for them to say that. And try to focus on what they're saying versus feeling, versus getting yourself into the feeling of what that conversation is stirring up in you, and the facts. And often I have found that, you know what, that was valid. They had a valid reason to have that challenging conversation with me. And so learning to just listen, not get defensive, and then take 24 hours to respond, just so that, things have cooled off, and you're not saying things that aren't constructive or productive to the conversation.
I think that's such great advice, of being in that listening mode and staying present to what they're saying. I would also say practicing reflexive listening can really help too. So if they stop talking and your head is still spinning a little bit and you don't know what you want to say just yet, you could use that reflexive listening of repeating back to them what you've heard, and then asking a question that dives a little bit deeper, a fact-based question like who, what, where, when, why, which, how, or even tell me more about that, or share some other specific examples so I have total clarity. And then even asking how they feel about what they just shared, or what do they want to see in the future based on what they just shared. And that will give your brain not only a moment to take a pause, especially in those moments where you can't just go straight to 24 hours before you respond, but it will also allow you to get a much clearer view of everything that you're hearing and making sure that you're hearing it correctly. Katie, what about for you? Any other tips or advice on that in terms of how do you stay calm, cool, and collected in those moments?
Oh, I wouldn't say I'm the best at staying calm, cool, and collected sometimes. But I would say taking the moment to breathe. Yeah, I'll share probably the first time that I went in to ask for a raise in college. It was my crummy campus job, and I was in sales and probably making $7 an hour, and I felt strongly that I should be making $8 an hour, and really worked myself up into a frenzy. So I was jittery and emotional, and just had all my facts and figures about how much I had sold and everything. And I just had to breathe and try to collect myself and defend my rationale. And I always come back to that of how I tried to use deep breathing, calming, pull the tears back of why I felt like I was worth that extra dollar. And forevermore in my career. And it opened up a good conversation with my manager at the time of, having those conversations and going into those types of discussions and negotiations, because they are emotional. You feel that it is more than a dollar figure. It's about the work you're doing because you enjoy the work and you want to be compensated. So, I think it's, for me, just taking that moment, maybe taking a little bit of emotion out of it and breathing.
I love that. And to your point, part of why it becomes emotional for people so often is that it's not just about money, it's about how you are valued as a person and whether you feel you're being valued. And many times those are the toughest conversations because it is with a manager or a leader or a senior person within the organization. And so I'd love to get from both of you your perspective. And I had asked Jill this when we had her here, but any advice of how anyone, regardless of their level, can maintain that relationship but address when there are issues with management. I just took a quick peek at the Q&A questions that have come in. And one of the questions is around how do you navigate a difficult conversation when that conversation is because there's an issue with management? So Katie, is that one that you could tackle for us?
Yeah, I have endeavored in that conversation at times. I've been, it's tough I'll say in one organization, I've often been an independent contributor, and sometimes you feel like you're hot potatoed between management. There's a lot of independent contributors in small organizations, and so I've always wanted to, learn from people and have a manager, have someone who's more of a coach and imparting more, leadership and wisdom and things like that, and giving more feedback. And Jennifer, you were saying earlier, women don't get as much feedback. And so I was often saying, what could I be doing? I had this call, it didn't go the way I wanted. What could I have done different? Could I have prepared differently? And I just wasn't getting as much of that. So I was finding these opportunities to, seek some outside training and things like that, and sort of, get those opportunities for coaching, because I was having these tough conversations kind of constantly where I was getting maybe difficult feedback that I wasn't performing as well as I wanted, but I wasn't getting constructive feedback of why I wasn't performing all that well. So it's, all right, Katie, you're not doing that great, but we're not going to tell you how to do better either. And so I just felt like I was stuck. I was floating. And so I've kind of brought forth this other opportunity of how I could maybe push myself in this other arena to get some coaching and do better for myself. And got that approved for some other leadership opportunities. And it ended up being a much more positive experience because I wasn't getting that coaching internally. And I was able to bring that to the organization, in other ways. But it was a lot of kind of tough conversations and that sort of lack of feedback and difficult conversations that sort of led us down that path over a couple months and quarters.
Yeah, and first of all, thank you for your vulnerability and openness and sharing where you were at and how you were able to get that external support. This is one of those areas where, again, I'm going to reiterate, the more we can feel comfortable asking multiple levels of questions to pull out that detail. And I always like to think of it as those fact, feeling, and future questions so that we can probe and dig deep, because that's when, in many cases, you get to the heart of the matter. And that's when you really understand what's driving behind it. Mary, I'd also love to ask you, considering that we saw in Menti, when we had asked everyone earlier that the two things that were most difficult is giving performance feedback, as well as letting people down when there's bad news around a potential raise or a promotion. Any advice for all the managers and leaders that we have here of what you've seen has worked well, or to the best of a bad situation?
I think it might have been Jill, or it was said in your presentation, that it's best not to do the sugarcoat sandwich, because you're missing the actual crux of the matter, and to not give false hope either. I had a manager, and I'll never forget this, where when it came to negotiations for salaries, I would not be happy and I wanted an increase, and I would say, well, can we talk about this? And he would say, oh, we could talk about this, but nothing is going to change, unfortunately, but he was gracious in how he said it. And I think being upfront like that, because there are circumstances and factors that are outside of that manager's control in terms of budgets. And so I think but not being cruel about it, just letting them have their say and talking about it and taking that feedback is important as well. But again, not sugarcoating, not giving false hope is something. And when it comes to performance reviews, I think those are the difficult conversations for a lot of new supervisors and managers to have. And what I always think about, they can have a litany of issues that they've come to me that they're going to talk to somebody about. And I'm like, well, are we just make sure you're not nitpicking on everything when it comes to a performance review? Like, let's focus on the important things, make sure that what we're sharing with them is helpful to them. It's necessary that we share it with them, and that we're sharing it in a respectful way. So I kind of go through that three, is it helpful? Is it necessary? And is it being communicated respectfully? Oh, you're on mute, Jennifer.
I was just saying, I love that. And I think that having those three areas there can be really, really helpful. I do want to make sure that we get to any other questions that we have from the audience here, and you can always add in some more for the final minutes that we have. But one of the other questions that came up was, how do you navigate situations where a senior voice in the room tends to shut down the dialogue rather than invite it? I'll give you both a minute to think about it, because this was in real time. We're all seeing this question here. Obviously, this can be one of the most difficult situations to deal with when you want to be able to have that conversation. And this is where what my suggestion would be to think about who are the mentors and sponsors that you have built relationships with throughout the organization, who can help you frame up what are the ways of how you might deal with this individual. Because so often when you're dealing with one of these situations, it's so important to know their personality. Is this something that they do with everybody? Is this something that's gone badly for other people? Many times it can be the kind of situation where if you talk to somebody who you trust and admire and who's seen them in other situations, you may find that actually once they're told something, they're great about it. And then they say, oh gosh, I was just trying to save everybody time. And that's why I didn't invite discussion, because I wanted to give you back the gift of time. So the other thing that I would suggest is to think about body language and how that could help play a role in terms of recognizing that people want to have the conversation. So I'll give you a small example. If your manager or leader is talking and you want to make sure that you get to weigh in on this, you can do a little one of these as they are talking that will signal to them, hey, I'd like to ask a question, or I have something that I want to add, or you can also signal via body language in terms of how you use your head. So you might lean in a little bit more, and when they're saying something that you don't agree with or you're not entirely clear on, then you lean in further and you squint your eyes a little bit. And that's another way, using nonverbal language, to let them know, like, I'm not following, I need more information, we need to talk about this. And then if you combine those two together, unless they're completely not paying attention and picking up things, then that's when you want to raise your hand and repeat back. Again, going back to that reflexive listening. Repeat back what you've heard, and you can even put it out there and say, I want to make sure that I heard what you said correctly. And that was that, there won't be bonuses this year. And then ask your fact-feeling future questions. Why are we not getting bonuses? Or who's not getting bonuses across the organization? Or tell us more about what that might look like in the future. Or how do you feel about the fact that we're not getting bonuses despite us having a great year? And then that can show them that they're heard and validate that they're successful in getting the message across, but also recognize that, just as we talked about here, nobody likes giving bad news. Nobody likes having these tough conversations. And so it humanizes you by showing that you have empathy for them as well, that you're hearing what they're saying, but you want more information. Mary or Katie, anything else you'd share there?
If Katie doesn't have anything, you had some really great advice here that I would also echo, and that is, if a senior person is shutting down conversation in the room like that, there are other people that you should maybe approach and ask about how to handle that situation, because it's probably not a new thing for that person, and look for those advocates who can perhaps bring that to the attention of the person to say, listen, this has been, brought up, and it's not again a personal thing. It's just that this is how it makes the others in the room feel. What is the point of them being there if they are not able to have a discussion? So I like that piece of advice that you had shared.
Fantastic. Katie, anything for you?
Yeah, I think I liked the nonverbal cues. I think if they're shutting down dialogue, it means there is probably an important dialogue to have. It's probably important to assess the venue and the room it's happening in, and then maybe if that's not the place to have it, then to set up or choreograph, like you were saying, a one-on-one discussion of, why are they maybe sandbagging further discussion around whatever's being whatever the topic is. Because if they don't want it discussed in that forum, it's probably worth investigating further. There's probably a reason to more fiercely dive into it.
Yeah, and I love that point, because it doesn't always necessarily need to happen in the team meeting, in the moment. And just as Mary had said, sometimes if you give yourself 24 hours to think about how you want to address it, then some of the angst can deflate a little bit that may come along with it. And you may be able to take a very different viewpoint in terms of how you're going to handle it, and then have that one-on-one difficult discussion. I thank you both, Katie and Mary, and certainly a huge thank you to Jill, who I know had to run off and is no longer here. But we'd love to hear from all of you. What is your biggest takeaway? What is one thing that you will do differently so that you can feel more confident leading these types of difficult discussions in the future? And just let us know right here. You can just type in a few words, and then that way we can have a little addition added to our playbook. And again, please take the 2 minutes that it will require to fill out that post workshop survey so that we can know what topics you want us to cover in the future. And that'll also give you the link to the resource guide right there. So again, thank you all. Barry, Blake, Ajay, for all of your ongoing support, and to all of you for your time. Give me a thumbs up if today's session was helpful for you and you've gotten some good tips out of it. And thank you. I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up there. And we look forward to seeing you in September at the next town hall, and certainly in October at the incredible annual conference, if not before then. Thanks, everyone.